to get on the meeting. Right. Okay, good morning. Thank you all for taking your time out this morning to join us on our webcast, our Working at Height webcast. We're good today. Going to look at understanding restraint versus fall arrest, personal fall protection equipment, and then we're going to actually look at some figures of using this equipment, how far you could potentially fall. Just to introduce myself, I'm Jamie Appleton. I look after all the Working at Height at JSP, and this is my colleague.
I'm Lauren. I am Customer Service Supervisor for UK and Ireland.
Perfect. To just give you a bit of idea of how this is going to go, so we're going to be about 20 minutes of me talking. Hopefully it won't bore you too much. After that, we'll have open it up for 10 minutes of questions. Please feel free to fire any questions through the presentation, and then we'll look at answering them all at the end. Okay, so when we're working at height, first of all, just going to talk about a little bit why we do this. So first couple of slides, I've just got some stats, just so we can all look at that. Hopefully we can all see that okay. First slide, this is back from 2019, 2020. So as per Riddle, 111 fatalities in the workplace. Obviously, we can see the descriptions. I'm not going to go through them all, but falls from height is obviously number one with 29 out of that 111. Okay, so it's quite a high percentage. Just have a little think of how that could move on. I mean, now in 2025, hopefully we would start to see those figures come down a little bit. Unfortunately, it's not quite the case. So we can see the stats that were released earlier this year. So there's actually 138 workers killed in work-related incidents. Obviously, the key thing for this, from my side of things, is obviously falls from height has greatly jumped up. We've now got 50 compared to out of that 138. So we're getting borderline a third of those fatalities are all related to falls from height, which obviously from my side of things is a little bit concerning. Hopefully things like these webcasts just give you a bit more confidence in speaking about it and understanding how this works, and hopefully we can stop this from happening. Okay. You just click back on the slide for me, sorry. So obviously when we're working at height, I'm sure everybody in here has heard the terms restraint and fall arrest. Specifically, we're just going to look at the differences between the two, what they do, and obviously how they work. So we're going to focus on first is we've got the two diagrams on screen here. Both guys are going to walk out. First one you can see is restraint. He's walked out as far as the edge. Obviously, used correctly is going to stop a fall from happening in the first place. All right, so we're taking or eliminating the risk of a fall happening when used correctly. The other side of things, this is when we have a fall arrest situation. So the guy walked, he's got a lanyard that's too long, he's walked out, and then that lanyard's going to work in a way which is then going to limit the force of a fall. All right, and again, we're going to go into that more detail shortly. Okay, so when we look at restraint, we've got the equipment here. 3 different types of restraint lanyards. Again, I'm sure you've seen these before. we've got a fixed restraint lanyard, which is effectively a solid rope, and then two different types of adjustable versions. We're just going to show you adjustable version now. If you could just drop that slide for me. So you can see here, we've got an adjustable restraint lanyard that will adjust on the rope. Way it works is as straightforward as this. Lauren in this scenario is my anchor point. I want to get to a roof edge that's potentially behind me. I've locked this lanyard off, so this lanyard is going to stop me from going any further than that, okay? Obviously, this makes it the safest when we're working at height. We're eliminating that risk of a fall. We obviously don't need to worry too much about our anchor points. We're just looking for something that's going to hold us in place. We don't have to think about rescue plans because obviously there's no fall. So there's going to ultimately be no rescue to be performed in that scenario. But as simple as that, obviously where it's adjustable, you can obviously move up and down the rope as in when you need to adjust. Works as nicely as that, okay? Just pop that back up. Again, we go on to a couple of scenarios why you have fixed ropes, you have adjustable ropes. I always prefer adjustable just because obviously the amount of scenarios that it gives you as opposed to just a fixed lanyard width. Okay, so obviously work restraint to think about. Kind of just showed it there from the quick demonstration, but it's just getting a rope that's going to get you to a certain point and it's then going to stop you from going any further than that, okay? So it's going to limit the user's movement. You've got the harness attachment point, which in this case is going to be on the back D-ring of the harness. You've then got the anchor point, which again is on the wall. You can see that there. The lanyard, which is obviously taut, which is obviously key. So there's no slack in that. And then you've got your fall risk area, which is obviously the other side of the satellite dish that this gentleman is doing the maintenance on. The diagram to the side of that, you can obviously see the limits with restraint. Obviously, when it's a certain length of lanyard, he can obviously get to the satellite dish. But if he wanted to get to any other areas there, he's kind of stuck if he wants to get right to the edge of the roof. Again, we'll explain that in a minute. Okay. So obviously I just mentioned about the different types where you have adjustable, you have fixed. This is why adjustable is quite important. You can see there you've got three incorrect uses of the of a lanyard, a restraint lanyard. So obviously in the top left there, the user, his lanyard is too long, which ultimately means you can see the picture below that, he could actually go off the edge because his lanyard is going to take him that far if he was to slip or fall. On the right hand side, on the upper picture, you can see that he's actually picked a lanyard. Again, if we think about fixed, it's not long enough to actually get him to the satellite dish. So he actually has picked a lanyard that's not long enough to get him to the job that he needs to do. Again, obviously, if we're thinking about fixed restraint, it's going to cause issues because you've only got one length of rope. If that one length of rope can't you get to certain areas, it's going to kind of limit your jobs, and you're going to have buy multiple lengths. Or if you think about adjustable versions, obviously when the user uses it correctly, you kind of covering all jobs with that one scenario. Then obviously in the bottom right, obviously the way it should be used, it's adjusted a lanyard to the satellite dish, but he's not going to be able to go any further than that. It's nice and tight to the anchor point. So if he slips or falls, it's just going to restrain him and keep him on the rooftop. Obviously work restraint is as simple as it comes, as easy as it comes, but it is always the safest port call. And it always should be used if you can, if you're at this point. So obviously if we don't have restraint, you saw the user stepped off the edge, and this is where we start to get into different types of fall arrest. So I've got three products on the screen there, three different types. We have the fall arrest lanyard, which I'm sure most people would have seen before. The self-retractable lifeline, again, I would imagine most people have seen before, and then rope and grabs. These are all different versions of fall arrest, and we will describe how they work. Just to give a little look, if we could just drop the slide for a second. So you can see that if you just go a bit closer to the camera. So this is our example of the fall arrest lanyard. Obviously, compared to the adjustable lanyard, you can see it's got that shock absorbing pack on it, which we'll discuss shortly. That's how it looks, very straightforward. We then look at the fall arrest block. And I'm sure we've all seen of these before. Obviously, the bigger they get, all fine. And then rope and grab. We can see that there. And again, we will discuss that in more detail shortly. All right. Just pop the slides back up. Okay, so just before I start this video, it's just a little bit of video on fall arrest and restraint. What it's going to show you is on a day-to-day basis, I get asked a lot, should I be using restraint? Should I use them for fall arrest? In what kind of workplace would you use one or the other? Could you potentially use both? It's just a short video of like a roof edge, and it's going to explain on certain parts of that roof edge where you would be in a restraint situation compared to where you would be in a fall arrest situation. And I'll kind of explain that as the video plays. Slides. Okay. So video started. Hopefully you can all see that. So first scenario, we're thinking about restraint. So in this scenario, the user can get to either edge, absolutely fine. So you've got myself there, and get to the point of the edge. The restraint lanyard is going to stop you going any further than that, as straightforward as it needs to be. So I can get to either edge fine. I've got my adjustable restraint lanyard. There's no risk of a fall. Obviously, if I now need to get to the corner of that roof, that's when you will be classed as a fall arrest situation, because obviously what could happen? You can fall off either side because you're exposed at either edge. Okay, so unfortunately, taking a slip there, and obviously that's when the fall arrest lanyard's going to catch you and it's going to deploy and work as it needs to. But just to show you kind of the working platform of a roof, in certain areas of that roof, you might need restraint, certain areas you might need fall arrest, but if you need to access multiple parts of that roof, potentially you're going to need both. Just hopefully that's quite a nice visual for you to see, to kind of compare. Okay. So fall distances. This is where we're going to talk about kind of the differences of how the fall arrest items work. And we'll bring this slide back up in a second and go to more detail. If we just drop that slide, if you just grab that one for me. So the way a fall arrest lanyard works is obviously our bodies cannot withstand force of just falling on a flat road with no shock absorption. Chances that's going to put through about 18 ton through the body. So chances are the anchor point isn't going to be able to hold. It's going to be too much force put through the body that it's actually going to cause serious damage. So when we have a fall, we need some kind of shock absorption to that lanyard. What Lauren's showing you here, obviously what we mentioned earlier, is the shock absorbing pack. So the way this pack works is on impact, this will deploy as such. So what we have is we've got 1.75 meters of webbing. That's all been sewn together, compressed down, and then put inside that pack. On impact, what happens is that webbing tears apart, and it's the tearing effect which then makes it safe on the body, okay? So we're trying to get to the body to below 6 kilonewtons. I say in terms of the tonnage for this, it's going to be about 18 kilonewtons. So with no shock absorption, we're putting about 3 tons more through the body than what we should be. Okay. Obviously, what we have to think about that is 1.75 meters. We obviously have to think about our full distance and how that will work. And obviously, we're going to go through that in a second shortly. All right. So if we pull that back up. Okay. So to use the fall arrest lanyard safely, this is the thing that kind of people miss. And when we're using restraint and fall arrest, people always look at fall arrest lanyard, they'll see the shock absorbing pack and they'll go, ah, it's got that fancy pack on it. That must be a hell of a lot safer to use than just a flat rope with a slight adjustment to it. They don't think about how that works. So obviously where I said we've got 1.75 meters in that pack, the lanyard itself is already 2 meters. We then think about our heights to our feet, and then obviously we want to allow a bit of clearance to that. So you can see on the screen, we've got the ABC. So the A is obviously the length of our lanyard and the shock absorbing pack. B is the user's height, and then the C is the clearance. Just to put some figures behind that. So we've got the 2 meter lanyard with 1.75 meters. So think it in this way, we're already at 3.75 meters, we're potentially going to fall. As a rule, we allow 2 meters for our height. And then we always allow that extra meter of clearance beneath that as well. So the final figure we get to is 6.75 meters, which when we all think about it, is pretty high up. We all see a lot of uses in the workplace where they'll be using a lanyard like this. They'll be 2 to 3 meters up. This lanyard, obviously, if they were to take a fall, they're going to hit what's below them before this can do its job. Okay. Obviously, going back to the start there with the stats, you see about falls from height being the number one. That necessarily doesn't mean that they're at a position where they are not using any equipment at all. They might be at a position where they're using the wrong equipment, using it incorrectly from obviously poor training, etc. Always something to think about. Okay, so obviously 6.75 meters is a long way up. Okay, obviously this can also be determined with the full factors itself. So full factor 0, we always think about connected above head height. So it's connected in the safest place possible. You are just going to fall the length of the lanyard, it's then going to catch you. If you're in a full factor 1 situation, we're effectively adding on another meter. So we're putting that at the user's waist, which means they're going to fall half the length of the lanyard before the lanyard can even catch them. So you're going to fall an extra meter on top. Full factor 2, we're then thinking feet level. So this is obviously the worst case scenario. You've obviously got to fall the full length of the lanyard. You've then got to fall that again before the lanyard's going to catch you. And then obviously once it's caught you, you've then obviously got the shock absorption, etc. So obviously always thinking about where we're connecting, we should always be trying to connect above the user's height. That will obviously impact how far of that 6.75 meters the user's going to fall. Obviously at full factor 2, chances are you're going to fall the whole length of that, which I don't know about anybody here, but that seems a long way to fall to me. And that's not something I would ever want to experience. Okay. So before we touch on the fall arrest blocks, just got a slight video just kind of showing the exact forces between the restraint lanyard, how that works, and then how the fall arrest lanyard will work in tow. So what's going to happen here is, unfortunately, it's an American commentary, so hopefully that's okay for everybody. The dummy will be taken up, it'll be dropped on the restraint lanyard, and you're going to kind of see the exact force that's put through that dummy. The most visual thing you'll see is how much that dummy will then move on impact. So it's going to do a lot of shaking, a lot of stress going through that harness, a lot of stress going through that body. And then on the flip side of that, there'll be a second drop where the fall arrest lanyard will just catch them. And obviously you're going to see the difference between the two. Okay. So say first drop, this is just a static rope. Essentially, it could be a restraint lanyard. So you see that as a lot of force that's been flung through that. So just to give the exact figure, 22 kilonewtons. So that's nearly, well, they're doing it in pounds, so 5,000 pounds of force going through the user. Just to put it into perspective, 22 kilonewtons is going to work out to be about 2,200 kilograms of force, which is a lot, isn't it? Obviously, the second drop, fall arrest lanyard, catches them straight away. Force is 3.7, so we're obviously below the 6 kilonewtons. You can just see, without looking at the stats, the visual of how much better that drop is. The user's just been caught, it's just lying there nicely. Obviously, if that actually happens in the workplace or not is different, but in terms of the testing side of things, that's it. What's going on? Still not. Okay, sorry. Our computer has just turned off. Bear with me a second. Okay, so from there, we are then going to pop into another video straight into fall arrest blocks. How they work. And then we'll go into more detail on that shortly. So this is basically a user climbs up onto a train and they've got to think about their working area. So as I'll touch on in a minute, fall arrest blocks, you obviously have a limit of how far you can go. 40 degrees is how far you can go for the block to work safely, essentially. That user's now exceeded that 40 degrees, which means they will be in an area of going to the floor, potentially swinging into something else. Okay, so just before we go through the figures, if we could just drop the slides, please. Just going to show you a little bit more of what was going on in that video itself. So, forest block, let me just grab that from Laura. Yeah, so the way these work is the user can kind of move freely. And what will happen is on a sharp impact, it will lock off as so. So it effectively works as a seatbelt. Just take that a little bit closer so we can see that. So you can see that as soon as you put a little bit forth, that will lock off. Okay. Obviously, these come in all range of sizes. That's just the mini version, but they will go up to big blocks, anything up to potentially 20 meters in length. Okay, you can obviously now get horizontal versions of those as well as the vertical. So the 40-degree angle, the vertical is obviously what we have to think about. Obviously, when it's then horizontal, you obviously have 40 degrees, but you could potentially connect it at waist or foot level as well. Obviously, it gives you a lot more variety if you haven't got anything connected above you as such. Okay, just pop the slides back up. So obviously, you can see from the figures on the slide, you've got 3.5 meters of really ground clearance to allow for. Obviously, that can vary depending on where you're connecting, how far from the 40 degrees you're going to, etc., etc. In this scenario, we kind of using the 3.5 as your general rule of thumb. If the block's connected above you, you're not walking out too far. You have the free fall distance plus the brake, bit of harness stretch, and then the height of the user. We let all of that. We're allowing us 2.5 meters. And then again, we're just adding in a safety clearance of 1 meter. Again, it's always good to allow for that. You don't necessarily always need it when using a 4S block, but it's always good to have. Obviously, when we start thinking about what we've done, is marketing team have put together a lot of diagrams. So if you're worried or have any concerns about how high you need to be up when you're working, we've got basically a full calculator where you can pop in your calculations of where you're going to be connected with the block, how far out you can walk, and it's going to give you a total full clearance for that. Okay, we'll link that in. That's basically on our JSP Go site where we have all the videos, which you've also seen today. And yeah, we are going to go on into this in a little bit more detail in the next couple of months. So there'll be another video. Particularly, we're going to go for the blocks itself. Okay. So we've got some bad examples of using 4S blocks. Apologies for that. We are having some technical issues, which is getting a little bit further across the place. But we've got some bad examples of self-retractable lifelines. So images there, which you might have seen before, or they might be relatively familiar, might look how they work. If you don't, basically what happened is there's a user, they've set up a hangman system. As I just mentioned, these blocks have to be connected above head if you're using a vertical only. So they have to be connected to something like a hangman system. You would then connect it to. The user can then connect to that and then obviously move as they want. Obviously, some take those for granted of how they work. And let's say a couple of bad examples just there. So if we start with a picture on the left first, what they've done is basically the hangman system isn't high enough. So if we think about the 40-degree of limit, that particular user hasn't even got close to the edge of where they're working. So what's going to happen is once they get to the edge, they're going to be well over that 40 degrees. And obviously they're going to be at risk that that block doesn't catch them, doesn't work because they're going to go over a sharp edge, or it's going to basically, what happens is put for a lot more force through the body. The reason for the 40 degrees of angle is what happens is once you go over that, in the fall, there'll be a lot more slippage in the wire. And that slippage, potentially, if it's caught on a sharp edge, might actually break the wire, or realistically, it's just going to put a lot more force through that block, and then we're going back to it's not going to be safe. It's not going to put less than 6 kilonewtons through them. Okay. They've also added an extra attachment lanyard, which you can see there. So you've got an orange strap going from the end of the 4S block to the back of the harness. That potentially hasn't even been tested for the use with that block. So again, you're adding on effectively a restraint lanyard to that, which again is going to then further increase the force of the fall in this scenario. Okay. Picture on the right is obviously a lot worse, a lot more difficult. Got a bit of sympathy for the user. Climbing up on these flatbed lorries full of equipment is very, very difficult. But what he's done is he set up two hangman systems, and you can see it in the picture that he's actually connected himself to the furthest one. Okay. So we think about the 40 degrees and we think how high he currently is up in the air. For sure, he is going to hit that ground if he falls off the side. I don't know how clearly you can see that, but what's going to happen is when that block locks from the far end, that's going to then swing him all the way back at that length. Obviously, he's the length of the lorry. We know the length of the lorry compared to the height that he's got is obviously not even close. So you just know he's going to hit that ground before it. Okay. So 3 scenarios on the screen: fall arrest or restraint. Top left, really, we're thinking done correctly with a correct risk assessment. If you allow for those roof lights, just restraint would be fine. Okay, so barriers go up around the roof light itself. You can then use the restraint lanyard to get as far as the satellite dish, and then you should be good to go. Obviously, these particular users haven't allowed for the roof light, which has then put them in a fall arrest situation, because obviously what could happen, as the user you can see there, he's gone straight through the roof light itself, and he's obviously going to then need a fall arrest device to catch him when he goes through. Obviously, the bottom left, we just know use an adjustable restraint lanyard, you get as far as the edge, and you're absolutely good to go. And then obviously in the right, we have the user in the corner of the roof where he's in a fall arrest situation because he can fall off either edge. So obviously he would need the fall arrest lanyard in that case, and obviously you're going to need to think about how far you've got beneath you to fall down to. Okay. It's kind of it. I say it kind of took the 20 minutes. So we did have a little bit of technical difficulty, kind of threw us off track a little bit, and I apologize for that. But are there any questions? Please feel free to fire them through. Okay, in terms of lifetime of the kit, it's a good question there. We have 10 years from the date of manufacture. So harnesses, lanyards, etc. is 10 years, providing they get checked by a competent person regularly. 10 years from life you get. Okay. In terms of, okay, so like max weight of the products and stuff like that. Okay, so the harnesses are rated to 140 kilos. All the blocks are also rated to 140 kilos. Obviously, restraint, there will be no fall, so there is no max user limit as such. We just say, again, because the harnesses are 140, the restraint, we don't want any more than 140 to do with that. Kind of reason for that is obviously, if you think about the term, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. These fall arrest devices have to work in a way where they're going to limit that force. The bigger you are, the harder that becomes, which is why you have to put that weight limit on there. Okay. Again, rope and grabs will be the same. And then fall arrest lanyards is always worth a double check, because some will be 100, some will be 140. It's always best to know from the manufacturer you're getting the equipment from to what that is. Okay. So yeah, there's a question in there about training. So in terms of training, obviously every worker at height needs to be trained in a way, needs to have a certificate to say they can do that safely. Whether that be basic work at height to anything further to rescue, inspection, etc. We have a training team which obviously could help with any of that you need if you have got workers that need to do that. Obviously, we also do the inspection course, so instead of getting your kit sent off every 6 months, you could have somebody in-house that then does all those competent person checks for you as well. Okay. Any more? Okay, I think we'll leave it. Oh, hang on, one more. Yes. So in the fall restraint, in a corner scenario, would you use multiple anchors instead? So Yeah, again, restraint lanyard, as long as you can connect to an anchor point, which is then going to stop you from being put in a fall arrest situation, you can connect to multiple different anchor points. Obviously, the thing with the anchor points is with restraint, you're just looking for an anchor point that's enough to kind of hold the user. So something that the user would think that's strong enough to hold me in a position for the period of work that I need to do. Obviously, when you come into fall arrest, you need to potentially have an anchor point tested or something structurally sound, because in that scenario in fall arrest, there's going to be a lot more force put through the anchor points. We need to know that it stands that force. Okay. We will be doing another webcast next month, which my colleague Lauren is going to be doing. Did you want to give a little bit of an introduction of what that's going to be about? And
It's going to be on logos, why we brand, and the logo process.
nice. So it's a webcast that we've not done before. Obviously, everybody's always interested to know about our logo helmets. So feel free. We'll send the links out and feel free to join. Obviously, as always, if you have any further questions, please get in contact with us and we will answer them the best we can. Thank you again for your time. Have a good day.